Hey friends, I hope you're doing great. I'd like to have a little talk about money and politics. Start out with politics. As I'm sure you're well aware, in our country we are really having a political impasse between the parties who are both fighting on moral grounds against the other side. And I don't question the sincerity of any of these groups, and I think some of the points that they're making are certainly valid points, but I think that they somewhat miss the point. I want to give you an analogy. The analogy is that, let's say a few of us pile into a car and we're going to take a road trip, and we're on this road trip and we're going to Vegas, baby. So we're going to drive to Vegas, and a couple people in the car are having an argument with the other couple in the car over which route we should take. And they both have some pretty good reasons as to why they want to take this highway versus that highway, and they're really not able to come to an agreement. So it's a pretty passionate argument as to which route is the best route for us to be traveling, because, certain routes are better driving and or have better sights along the way. And they're having this pretty impassioned argument with each other. Meanwhile, I'm driving the car and I'm saying, hey guys, yeah, that's all nice, but we have a bigger problem here, which is we're just about out of gas. And nobody wants to hear that. They just keep arguing about which highway we should be taking. And I'm going, yeah, guys, but that's all well and good, but we got to put some gas in this thing. And everybody in the car is saying, well, I've just got a couple dollars. I can't help, but it's really important we take this highway. Well, we're not going to get to Vegas unless we put some gas in the car. That's just the simple fact. And it doesn't matter which highway we take, we ain't going anywhere without fuel. And so that brings us to the whole government situation. Now, let me see if I have something. Yeah, here we go. Here we are. Isn't that cool? That's cool, huh? That's $20. That's a $20 bill. It's U.S. currency. Now, if you're like me, like most of us, you gotta work pretty hard to get your $20. If you're making $20 an hour, probably it's about 2 hours worth of your labor. And everybody I know is working hard doing something. It's not easy. That's right. It probably takes about 2 hours at $20 an hour, because out of the money that you make, there's mandatory deductions for taxes and Social Security taxes, and I don't know if it's really legitimate, but you can deduct your health care expense. And so that probably accounts for maybe nearly 40% of what you make you don't get, because it gets pulled away for mandatory deductions. And then when you want to go purchase something for $20, well, it's not really $20, is it? Because there's sales tax applied, which is another 10%. If you want to buy something interesting and fun, like gasoline or cigarettes or alcohol or some of those sorts of things, there's additional taxes imposed. And so if you want to get a real $20 worth of merchandise, it's probably going to take you a couple of hours of hard labor in order to get there, if you're making $20 an hour. If you make less, you certainly have my sympathy. If you're making more, if you're making a lot more, well, good for you. But it's not easy for most of us. It's tough times. And that's the problem with our government, is the money. It's all about the money. And that's where we really have a big issue that's looming ahead. The national debt right now is about $20 trillion. And that's just the current debt today. If we add in the unfunded liabilities, which are all of the things that we are obligated and have promised to pay out in the future, and for which we will need money to pay, things such as future pensions and Social Security payments, we are looking at somewhere north of $210 trillion. Some estimates estimate as high as $400 trillion. Numbers are a little fuzzy, but it's something like that. It's well over $200 trillion we are obligated to pay, which we don't have. The gross domestic product, the GDP of the United States, is also about $20 trillion, maybe just a little bit less. So that means that if we were to take every single bit of income from the United States, your entire paycheck, all of the output that all of our industries produce for an entire year, it still wouldn't be enough to pay off the current debt. And if we include the unfunded liabilities, which I think it's only proper that we include, that's to say it would take well over 10 years of continuous output of the economy to pay off that debt. But of course we couldn't pay off the debt because as time moves forward, the interest on that debt would keep ballooning the debt. And so it's untenable. It cannot be paid. This is like if you had a household income of $100,000, but you had outstanding credit card debt of over $1 million. It's just not going to happen. We can't pay off the debt. Now, we should think about where all this money comes from and how the economic system really works. If you will, what does the government do? Well, the obvious answer is the government provides important services, such as the military, Homeland Security, doing all sorts of policing operations. It provides a lot of social programs for social welfare, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and a variety of other ancillary tasks. Somebody's got to fix the roads. But how does the government do these things? Well, it isn't just a bunch of happy gnomes out there doing this work. The government contracts with companies and people to get the work done. In the case of the military, we hire organizations like Blackwater to go do policing operations, or maybe we hire soldiers individually and directly in cases like the U.S. Army or the Navy or the Marines or the Coast Guard or the Armed Forces. In the case of the social welfare system, sometimes we give payments directly to people. Sometimes we hire individuals to manage things like the Department of Education, and they hire teachers. We hire air traffic controllers. But in all of these instances, what the government does is it defines policy which determines where they will funnel money to organizations or individuals to do the work that they desire to have done. So in this way, let's think of our government as a very large, complicated set of big pipes with valves on them. And rolling through those pipes isn't water, but it's money. So money comes into the top and it gets siphoned down through all of these pipes, and our congressional people are up there busily cranking and turning valves to send flows of money to this project or this department or that department. And that's really all they do. It's just a money transferring system. So, where does the government get its money from? Well, the obvious answer would be our tax dollars, correct? We pay taxes into the government, which then is used to fund things. But not so fast, because if that was the case, how would we rack up such a debt? You see, what really happens is the government decides that it wants to engage in a particular project, which is going to cost a sum of money. And so they need this money to do the project, and they then issue bonds. And a bond is really nothing more than an IOU note saying that we will promise to pay back this amount of money in a certain time period. And so the government scribbles out an IOU for large amounts of money, and then they put these IOUs up on an auction to be purchased, and they are purchased by the central banks. And so the government puts up a bond saying they want $1 trillion, and the central bank says, we are happy to give you $1 trillion if you pay us back all of that and more at a future date. And so the central bank then hands the government the $1 trillion, and they proceed with their funding of projects. Now, that $1 trillion is, of course, just a bunch of numbers on a computer somewhere. It's generally not real money, although the government may take a portion of that and allocate it to Treasury and tell Treasury to buy some ink and paper, and some of that $1 trillion then becomes these. But most of it stays in a computer, and it's just a ledger entry. You know, it's just digital numbers. It's nothing physical, nothing real. It's just representation of value. And then after the government has done all of this, at a later date it turns around to you and me and all of us and says, we need taxes to come in and offset this money that we have borrowed so we can pay back the bankers. That makes sense. But the thing is that our tax revenue doesn't come close to paying off the debt that's been incurred by these folks. We could pay all, 100%, every last cent of our income in taxes to the government, and it still wouldn't come close to paying off the debts that have been incurred. This is an untenable system. When businesses or households run their finances like this, they go into bankruptcy and they get wiped out. And that's where our government is. How long will the banks continue to give us this money if we won't pay them back? Well, they've been pretty patient about it. And there's a reason for that. So the question is, where does the bank get the money that it loans to the government? Does it get it from people who deposit money into the bank? No. The bank creates a ledger entry and issues the money to the government and then expects to get paid back with interest. That is, the bank does not draw that money from any account. The bank just creates the money from nothing. Now that's a little bit of a hard concept for a lot of people to get their mind around, but the bank creates the money from nothing and then issues it to the government with a demand to repay. But in order to repay it, we have to engage in commerce and labor-making activities in order to earn our money. Do you see the problem? Let's play a game of Monopoly. You familiar with the board game of Monopoly? It's a fun game. It's been around forever. You've probably played it. It's a board game. And for those who aren't familiar, I'll briefly describe. It's real simple. It's you have a board, and around the perimeter of that board are squares, all divided out. Each square represents a piece of real estate. And each piece of real estate on the board has two prices. One price is the price to purchase that square of real estate, and the other price is to rent it. And then each of the players in the game throw dice and move a game piece around the perimeter of the board, however many squares the dice come up with. And so as you pop your game piece onto one of the squares on the board, you then have the opportunity to purchase that piece of real estate at its sale price if it has not been purchased yet. But if it has been purchased by another player, then you have to pay the rent fee associated with that square on the board. Each of the players in the game are issued a set amount of money, same amount of money, as they begin. And as we move around the board, people purchase properties and then have to rent from those properties that other people have purchased. And the game proceeds on, and some players make money and some players lose money. And if you lose all your money, you then go bankrupt and you're out of the game. Eventually, there's one player standing who wins the game of Monopoly. And the game is a pretty good illustration of commerce in our world. So let's imagine that game with a twist. Same game, but this time, before the game begins, we roll the dice, and a player with a high number on the dice becomes the fiscal administrator of the game. And he is a player just like any other player who participates in the game, with one twist. He controls the money supply. He's the one who manages the money. And being in that position, he has the option of giving other players a loan if he wants to. And he also has the option of giving himself a loan if he wants to, if he gets into a tight spot. Now, when he gives another player a loan, he doesn't do it out of his money and his reserves. He does it out of the game's money. Or if he prefers, he could just, grab a piece of paper and a Sharpie and put 20 on a piece of paper, and now it's money. And so that player, that administrator, would have access to unlimited money. How would that game go? Well, it's pretty obvious how that game would go. That player who has access to unlimited money would win the game. It wouldn't be fair, would it? I mean, no matter how shrewdly the other players play the game, they could never win against somebody with unlimited money. I think how that game would go after a round or two of it would be the people would gather around, they'd roll the dice and go, oh, Lisa's the monetary administrator. Well, she wins. And she'd say, hey, guys, we haven't even begun to play. And everybody would be going, it's pointless to play. We know what the outcome is. You're going to crush all of us. Why should I engage in commerce with somebody with such an advantage? Well, that's how we are in the United States with our fiat currency. The bankers create money. Nobody else can compete. The end game is that they'll own everything. You see, all of the money in our system is loaned into our system with interest. This $20 right here, someday it's got to go back to the bankers. And we got to give the bankers back a little more than the $20 they let us use. Now think about this. If every dollar in our system is loaned to us at interest, how do we pay it back? Well, we can certainly hand all of the money back that was loaned to us, but that doesn't cover the additional interest, does it? And so, where do we get the money to pay the interest payments? Well, we could take out another loan, get some more money to pay off the original first loan, but then that secondary loan has interest payments. So you see, you can never get on top of the game. So every dollar in circulation has an interest charge attached to it, which cannot be paid with this note. It needs to be paid with another note, but that note itself has an interest payment also. So eventually the whole system snowballs and crashes because there's no external money in the system. Now, that's a somewhat simplified way of looking at things. I think it's accurate, but there's also other twists that actually make the game even a little more dire. But you see, with our current economic system, we're approaching an end game where all of the money that we have isn't enough to pay off the debts that we've incurred. And when the government stops being able to pay people, everything comes to a stop. So we can have our arguments over petty policy issues, and even not so petty policy issues. But the bottom line is that everything in our system is glued together through the blood flow of money. And when the money stops, the whole game stops. Unless we change the game. And I guess that's the challenge that we will face in our future. It'll be interesting times, my friends. So, don't get too bound up in the politics. See the big picture. There's some big issues on the horizon, bigger than all this little stuff. And after the dust settles, we'll have the opportunity to do something different, something new. And if we choose right, something better. Something to think about. And with that, I hope all of you have a fabulous day. If you like this content, I would be honored if you would subscribe. If you click the bell notification, YouTube just might notify you if I put up something new. And hope to catch you next time. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for sticking around. And good luck, my friends.